She smiled while dying, not because she was delusional, not because she had made peace with it, but because she understood something most of us never do. Death wasn't a threat to her, it was a doorway. And this is her story. Claire was a nurse. For 2 decades, she walked the quiet corridors of palliative care. She held the hands of the forgotten, the terminal, the terrified. She was there for their last breaths. She whispered prayers when no one else came. She memorized the rhythm of beeping machines and the silence that followed. And then one day, her own scan lit up, stage 4. They told her she had weeks, not years. But here's what stunned everyone around her. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She smiled. When asked why, she simply said, "I've seen how people die. I've also seen how they live. I choose something different." Now, pause for a second. If that was you, would you be able to say the same? Let me ask you something personal. When was the last time you thought about your own death? And I don't mean in that vague, far off, yeah, someday I'll die kind of way. I mean, really thought about it. Your heartbeat fading, your breath slowing, the final moment when all the noise, all the things you worried about vanish into stillness. Scary? For most of us, yes. Death is terrifying because it strips us of control. It reminds us of impermanence. And maybe, just maybe, it reflects all the life we haven't really lived yet. But what if we told you that you could train your mind to see death not as an enemy, but as a wise teacher? What if ancient wisdom from 2,000 years ago held the key to facing death? With grace? What if science is only now catching up to what the Stoics already knew? This is where the story deepens, because Claire didn't just smile at death, she prepared for it. And not in a morbid way, she lived every single day as if it was her last, not with fear, but with presence. She followed a ritual, a mental practice. Each morning, a breath, a reminder. Memento mori, remember you will die, not to scare herself, but to awaken herself. And maybe that's why she felt so alive, even when her body was dying. You see, Claire wasn't fearless by accident. She was fearless by design. She trained for death the way an athlete trains for a marathon, day by day, thought by thought, reflection by reflection, and that changes everything. Because if someone like Claire, watching her own clock run out, can smile at the end, then maybe the rest of us, trapped in fears about the future, anxiety about the unknown, pressure to do more, can finally learn what it means to be free. Free from the fear of endings, free to live with intention, free to choose what really matters. So here's my invitation to you. Don't run from the shadow of death. Sit with it. Gaze into it. Listen to what it whispers. Because the truth is, death doesn't want to hurt you. It just wants to remind you you're still alive. And that's where our journey begins. Claire didn't fear death because long before the diagnosis came, she had already begun the work of dying, but not in a hopeless way. She was preparing not for an end, but for a return. A few days after she got the news, she went home, brewed a pot of jasmine tea, and pulled her old copy of Meditations off the shelf. Its pages were folded, underlined, worn like an old friend. She ran her hand across the cover and whispered, "You've been waiting for me." Then she opened to a passage she'd marked years ago, one that had guided her through the loss of patients, friends, even her mother. You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do, say, and think. Marcus Aurelius. And that's exactly what she did. She didn't try to fight it. She didn't fill her calendar with bucket list dreams or last-minute escapes. She filled her time with meaning. Her mornings began with silence. She'd sit by the window, holding a warm mug, watching the light shift through the trees like breath through lungs. Sometimes she cried, but more often she smiled, softly like someone remembering a secret. Her neighbors noticed something. She looked more alive than she ever had. Even as her body weakened, her eyes grew brighter, calmer, grounded in something unshakable. One afternoon, her sister asked, "Claire, are you scared?" She paused, then replied, not with denial, but with clarity. "Fear comes when you still think you have something to lose, but I've already surrendered. I'm not dying, I'm dissolving, and I'm ready to return to the source." Claire didn't mean source in a religious sense. She was spiritual, yes, but not dogmatic. For her, the source was what Marcus called nature, what Taoists called the way, what science might call energy returning to the field. She didn't need to name it, she just needed to feel it. On her dresser, she kept 3 small items. 1, a photo of her younger self at the beach, laughing. 2, a smooth river stone she'd carried since childhood. 3, a note she wrote to herself every morning. "Today I will remember what matters." And what mattered most to her wasn't legacy or wealth. It was presence, connection, sitting with her niece in silence, writing letters to friends she hadn't spoken to in years, eating a bowl of soup slowly, with gratitude, letting the wind touch her face like a final blessing. One evening, she told a hospice volunteer, "Most people meet death like a thief in the night, but I've been having tea with her for years. She's no longer a stranger, she's my mirror." And maybe that's the real secret. Claire didn't wait until death to start living. She started living because of death. It was her greatest teacher, her clearest compass, and the reason she could finally let go of the illusion that we're in control. She stopped obsessing over time. She started pouring her energy into timelessness. In one of her last journal entries, she wrote, "The body is afraid, but the soul is just curious." That's when it hit me. Claire wasn't escaping anything. She was arriving. This wasn't about bravery in the heroic sense. It was about stillness, acceptance, and perspective. The kind of courage that doesn't shout, but sits, breathes, watches, smiles. She wasn't trying to beat death. She was trying to understand it. And in doing so, she discovered something most of us miss, that we are not here to outlive death. We are here to outlove fear. There's something strange that happens when you stop fearing death. It's not just emotional, it's neurological. Your brain actually changes. Let me explain. In her final months, Claire didn't just talk like a Stoic, she lived like one. And what's incredible is that modern science now confirms what Marcus Aurelius taught 2,000 years ago, that your thoughts shape your biology. And that courage, it's not a trait, it's a practice. Claire practiced that courage every morning, before her tea, before the pain medication, before the nurse arrived. She would sit on her bed, close her eyes, and ask herself one quiet question: what if today was my last gift? Not in a panicked way, not in denial, but in reverence. She practiced a Stoic ritual called premeditatio malorum, premeditation on adversity. It's the act of imagining loss, not to despair, but to liberate. To remind yourself that nothing is owed, everything is borrowed. The Stoics believed this daily rehearsal of impermanence built a muscle of the mind, emotional detachment without apathy, love without clinging, action without fear. And neuroscience, it agrees. Studies at Harvard and Stanford have shown that people who regularly reflect on death show reduced activity in the amygdala, the brain's fear center, increased connectivity in areas responsible for empathy, moral reasoning, and long-term vision, higher levels of serotonin, the neurochemical linked to calm and resilience. Claire didn't need these studies, she embodied them. One night, a hospice nurse asked her, "How do you stay so calm?" Claire smiled and said, "Because I already lived the storm in my mind. Now I get to sit in the eye of it." You see, most of us spend our lives trying to outrun discomfort. We numb ourselves with screens, noise, overwork. But the Stoics, they walk into discomfort on purpose, not to suffer, but to become familiar with it, to make peace with the monster under the bed. Claire did exactly that. She befriended her fear. And when you befriend fear, it loses its claws. This wasn't about pretending everything was fine. She was in pain. Her body was failing, but her soul one was expanding. She had trained her perception. And in the Stoic worldview, that's everything. It's not death that disturbs you, Epictetus wrote. It's your judgment of death that does. So Claire changed the judgment. She saw death not as a failure, but as a graduation, not an enemy, but a reunion. Here's what's wild. MRI scans of long-term Stoic meditators show a structural thickening in the prefrontal cortex, the area that governs reasoning, choice, and perspective. What does that mean? It means your ability to face death, like Claire did, is not a miracle. It's a trainable skill. And that's the gift she left us. She taught us to welcome impermanence as a teacher, to breathe in the unknown and exhale control, to stop waiting for life to feel safe before we start living. Because life is never safe, but it's always sacred. And that is the paradox the Stoics whisper into our souls. Prepare for loss, but love fiercely. Let go of control, but show up fully. Accept death, and in doing so, finally become alive. Claire didn't beat cancer, but she beat fear. And in this world, that might just be the greatest miracle of all. Claire died on a Tuesday morning. The wind was still. The birds, for some reason, were louder than usual, and the room smelled faintly of oranges. Her sister was there, holding her hand. The nurse sat quietly, watching the rise and fall of Claire's chest, slow, then pause, then stop. And in that final moment, she smiled. Not a dramatic smile, but the kind of smile you give when you finally understand something you've been trying to grasp your whole life. A smile that says, "I'm ready now." After she passed, they found her final journal entry on the nightstand. Just 6 words, scribbled in her delicate handwriting. "I am not the body." Free, that was it. Not a philosophical essay, not a plea, just presence, awareness, truth. And I wonder, how many of us live entire lifetimes without ever reaching that kind of peace? We chase it in relationships, success, spirituality, therapy, books. But Claire found it by facing the very thing we're taught to avoid, the truth that we will die. But here's what she showed us. Death isn't darkness, it's clarity. It strips away the lies we tell ourselves. It humbles our egos. It ends the illusion that we're in control. And in that emptiness, something pure arises. Not fear, but peace. Not despair, but stillness. Claire didn't become enlightened. She simply let go of what wasn't hers to carry. Her regrets, her identity, even her name. She became what the Stoics call aligned with nature, what Zen calls no mind, what science calls coherence. And now I want to ask you something. Not in theory, not later, but right now. If today was your final Tuesday, would you be at peace? If you had 10 days like Claire did, who would you forgive? Who would you call? What would you finally say out loud that you've been holding back? Because the truth is, we all think we have time, but we don't. And that's not a tragedy, that's a gift. Marcus Aurelius said, "Do not act as if you had 10,000 years to live. Death hovers at your elbow. While you live, while it is in your power, be good." Claire was good, not perfect, not enlightened, just present, and that made her free. So today, I want to leave you with a question, one that I hope echoes in your chest long after this video ends. What would your life look like if you stopped being afraid of dying? Would you be bolder, kinder? Would you pause more? Would you finally stop living on autopilot? You see, this story was never about Claire. It was about you, about us, about how we waste our days running from the one truth that could actually make us whole. So here's my invitation. Before you click away, before the noise of the world returns, just sit, close your eyes and breathe. Feel your heartbeat, feel your breath. That is life, and it's yours right now.